In our current storytelling culture, it's understood that a major franchise like the Avengers or Justice League will, rather unfortunately in the case of the latter, be followed up by at least one sequel. It's just the way our society is. Once we've gotten attached to a character or world, we want to follow their life beyond just a single page from their adventures. Sometimes these sequels turn out great, and you have the birth of something amazing like the MCU, which has incredibly put out 14 great, 4 good, and 2 terrible movies. You know the ones.
I like the way you explain things.
But more often than not, in an attempt by producers to follow in this trend, an incredible show or franchise is stretched out way beyond its expiration date and fails to catch lightning in a bottle the same way. The viewer's desire to see more of something they really enjoyed leads to having it ironically destroyed by their inability to take the first incarnations for what they were, and the artistic integrity required to create it is completely undermined by future sloppy attempts to extend the story. It shouldn't be too hard to think of examples of this. And yet, despite over a decade of this phenomenon leading to massive box office flops that disappoint and even destroy fandoms, the trend continues. This isn't an altogether new idea, of course. Remember the Greek gods, the Norse? Our ancient storytelling revolved around characters and their stories. So, as long as we can think back, serialization's been around. It's our love of characters, worlds, culture heroes that fuels an ongoing interest in their next chapter. This seems to be innate to us, putting familiar characters in different stories, subjecting them to new and exciting challenges, adapting the character and seeing how they react in varying circumstances. It's fun. Serialization has been around for quite a while now, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle pretty much brought it to modernity with his famous Sherlock Holmes novels, followed by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby through the booming popularity of comic books. Most of these plots were written in war times, when writers felt people needed heroes. So of course, our comic book movies follow this trend, because they're simply adhering to pre-established canon, and stories that fans could only dream of seeing on the big screen at one point. But that doesn't mean it belongs in all our stories. Just because we like a character, that doesn't mean they need to be expanded upon until we hate them. There are plenty of examples of recurring characters we love that serve a limited purpose. Like Jermaine from Shaolin Showdown, a character introduced in episode 9 of the series. He was like a foil to the archetypal Omi, a kid from the street that played basketball with the team and was really charismatic. In season 2, he returned in a few episodes in a totally different capacity as a Shaolin monk trained by the major antagonist of the show. And that's it. There was no Jermaine Showdown or Better Call Jermaine. The character served a purpose, and then that was it. And as a kid, I loved it. Recurring characters and those with smaller roles are usually my favorite, and episodes centric to them were always way better than the ones about the main character, at least to me. Richie in Pokemon is another great example of this, and while as a kid I would have loved to see a show about him, as an adult I'm aware that it wouldn't have done very well compared to the main series. Although he and a myriad of other interesting characters were featured in the Chronicle episodes, which I actually like. These episodes weren't stretched to excess to exhaust the character's charm, but instead gave an extra glimpse into their lives. Examples like this allow us to check in on great characters while keeping their integrity of the story intact, and therefore the story as a whole intact as well. But most of the most famous stories in recent history, the kind you had to slave over in middle, high school, and college, are one-shots. The kind of stories you don't read once, but read over and find new meaning even hundreds of years after the book was written. We didn't check in on the aftermath of Romeo and Juliet's deaths and how they affected the families. We simply took the classic love story for what it was, and we're satisfied. There's no The Old Man and the Sea 2, Swordfish's Revenge, no Crime and Punishment 2, Tales from Siberia, and certainly no Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. What's that? They did that? What? Simba's daughter got with a relative of Scar. Isn't that lion incest? But hold on. I gotta see this.
Let's all go to the lobby.
And certainly no Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, or any other sequel to the masterpiece that brought about the Disney Renaissance. These stories do what they have to. They're able to tell a brilliant tale full of deeply philosophical allegory, well fleshed out stories and adventures, and of course realistic characters we fall in love with and even wish to see more of sometimes. One-shot stories are closed off though, and even if the author creates an incredibly well fleshed out world where there could be potentially dozens of sequels and stories, like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, the tale ends where it does for a reason. In this case, it ends where, and spoilers for Brave New World if you haven't read it, a man named John, raised in the wild, is taken to a dystopian society where his mother was from before birthing him in secret on the Savage Reservation. It's a pretty harsh name. It's basically a Native American reservation, in the future though. And upon seeing the depravity and loss of virtue and culture it has devolved into after a lifetime of only knowing the works of Shakespeare and the old world moral standards alive in the native reservation where he grew up, he tries and fails to live a life as far detached from it as possible. But after not being able to get away from tourists coming to see the savage and himself participating in a crazed, drug-fueled orgy, he is found in the lighthouse where he took refuge. The book then uses poetic language to avoid saying it explicitly, but John hung himself. Now, there were plenty of other characters in this world. There could have been stories told about the rest of them beyond the death of John the Savage, but the story ended as John did. That was the end of it. The story was done. That was the end of this allegorical cautionary tale of a world. And with it came a classic. Oftentimes, sequels are set up by leaving questions yet to be answered in the next installment. But in doing so, the art of allowing the viewer to make guesses about what happens next is lost, and replaced with us being forcefully spoon-fed one set canon. And the interpretation skills you excruciatingly learned in English class go unused and out the window for the rest of your life. There's a difference between loose ends that require additional installments and ambiguous endings that are meant to keep the reader or viewer interested and encapsulated in a beautiful and complete arc that yielded their own sense of fulfillment. Now, a one-shot doesn't have to be just one movie or one book. A series can be seen as a one-shot if it has a closed continuity and knows exactly when to end. While tons of examples of this exist, let's use a recent and well-known one that most people agree about. Harry Potter. A collection of 7 mesmerizing books and 8 fantastical movies that most people around my age grew up with. This series defined our generation and brought about the meteoric rise. Why do they call it meteoric rise? Wouldn't it be meteoric fall? Like, meteors don't rise. Meteoric rise of the young adult fantasy genre that gave us great series like Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Inheritance series, and, well, maybe we shouldn't talk about those. This series told us the tale of Harry Potter through his 7-year career at Hogwarts and developed a world so well made that you can literally, physically visit it today in Orlando, Florida. I mean, seriously, on a small tangent, really imagine being J.K. Rowling. You're just a broke writer who came up with a world in your head, made it all up by herself, and brought it to life by writing it down. Not only did she, like some writers, get to watch her imagined of world come to life on the big screen, she wrote her story so well that a theme park built it, and she can now literally walk through the grounds of the world she invented in her mind. Talk about immersion. Anyway, we all love this series. I genuinely don't know anyone that's actually read the books or seen all the movies and doesn't love it. The series knew exactly when to end. The 7th book, concluding alongside Harry becoming an adult in the wizarding world and finishing off the evil Voldemort, thus fulfilling the prophecy. I mean, it was perfect. It knew exactly when to oh, wait. Yes, even this titan of industry fell victim to the cash cow that is stretching a series beyond its limits. And pretty much everyone hates it. Seriously, look up Cursed Child Review. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Right, so I finally cracked the book open on Saturday, August 6th, and had it read in a few hours. I closed the book and had one immediate thought. Well, that was actually quite bad.
Ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Of course, Rowling herself didn't write this, but she endorsed it as canon and, quote, the 8th Harry Potter story. And it sucked. Straight up, it was awful. We were all happy with the end of the series, but the inconceivable success of it, combined with the rise of the MCU and serialization as a whole, stretched out a story that had already been finished. I can't tell you how many series were stretched too far for money. Some shows that were part of my development into an adult, like Heroes, Lost, Dexter, Weeds, White Collar, Shaolin Showdown, Avatar, House, and Prison Break, were destroyed by being stretched past their breaking point.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay?
Seriously, try going back and rewatching the first season of Weeds, or the first season of Heroes. It's a masterpiece, it's brilliant for the genre it's in, but then go watch the last season immediately after. Don't watch the slow, gradual decline, but simply contrast the brilliant beginning with the terrible death at the end that it was forced to endure because producers decided that the show needed to go on because it had become successful and watched. It destroys it. It makes it nearly unwatchable, and by the end of the series, you can't remember why you were watching it in the first place. Netflix has a nasty habit of trying too hard to expand on stories and universes if the first season does well. Iron Fist was bad, most people agree, and shows that are good, even after extending, somehow get cancelled before ending properly. Like, why can't he just finish the show? Like, I don't know, don't pay him or something. I just want to see how it ends. It was so good. One example comes in a show I really liked, starring Will Arnett, called Flaked. I won't get into the plot, but let's just say that the end of the first season was very satisfying for me. And when it ended, I thought, wow, that was great. I thought the art of the literary classic had been brought to television, and that using a 10-episode arc was able to tell a story better than a movie could, but that it would close off and create classics in a way I didn't think could happen for TV. And then season 2 came out. I tried watching it out of loyalty to the first season and Will Arnett, but I couldn't get past episode 5. It was a season that didn't need to exist in response to a first season doing very well. I was really excited when I thought the type of storytelling from novels I love, like Of Mice and Men, The Fountainhead, and Heart of Darkness had come to television. But of course, that wasn't the case, and the almighty dollar triumphed again. Even the greatest show of our generation, which ushered in the golden age of television as it's called, Breaking Bad, which knew exactly when to end, never got old, and was brilliantly executed in ways I'll probably explore more deeply in another video now that I think about it, fell victim to this. And after seeing the brilliance of Vince Gilligan's writing, Better Call Saul was born. I actually don't dislike this show too much, but I couldn't make it through season 2. There is a large fan base, however, but when you watch the show, you can tell it doesn't have the same brilliant, meticulous writing style of Breaking Bad, where every scene mattered. Every episode was great. Nah, this show feels like a great writer is just drawing something out in response to a massive fan base and the wake of, again, the greatest show of our generation. While I'm not saying serialization needs to die, as it definitely belongs in comic book movies which follow a medium based on the most extreme serialization we know, and it works perfectly there, I will say that it doesn't exactly translate over well to every single story. The art of the one-shot needs to come back if we hope to make the type of stories that future generations grow up being inspired by and studying. The type of stories that we call classics. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. It really means a lot to us that the work that we're making is reaching more and more people. Our most recent video had a small spike in views right after it came out, and the feeling of knowing that people are enjoying our work is absolutely unbelievable. So if you haven't seen the video yet, go check it out. It's about Donald Glover and how he's great. Also, please follow us on Twitter at MediumDSpeaks and stick around for more content at like some point, I don't know.